Good afternoon, everybody. I'm extremely humbled to be here because I feel a little bit out of place. But not only do I perhaps feel a little bit out of place here, I tend to spend the majority of my life putting in the position of being out of place. And I would like to take you on that journey. But I'm going to begin here. This was just a couple of months ago, and you would think at the age of 48, I would have learned from all my journeys and my experiences what's happening. But I made potentially a very dramatic mistake. I was invited to southern Sudan. And there's a group of people living there, a tribe called the Mundari. And somebody was aware of what I was doing in the project, and they said, you have to come and see this tribe. They're living on the banks of the Nile, and they've never been photographed before, and they're extraordinary people, and everything's fine at the moment because there's a ceasefire here, so it's all very safe. So I thought, well, I've got to be traveling for the last 48 years, I'll be fine. So off I went, and I met my guide at the airport, this sort of towering man, hulk of an extraordinary man. He said, everything's going to be fine. Come with me in my Land Cruiser. We're going to go off into the desert. He said, there's one slight problem, though. There may be a few roadblocks along the way. Don't worry, I'm in control. I'm here to protect you. So we got into the car, and within 1 hour, there's a roadblock. And as you can imagine, every hour, every half an hour, in some cases, every 10 minutes, there were roadblocks. But after the first day, we got quite accustomed to it, and everything was quite comfortable. And this towering driver was looking around, grinning, saying, as you see, everything's fine. You just got to smile, make a joke, and they'll wave a few guns at you, and off we go. And then around midday, something strange began to change. We were driving along, and it was this very desert landscape, very hot, 40 degrees centigrade. Nobody. In the distance, there was a group of what turned out to be children. And they were standing in the road. And they all had weapons. And if any of you have ever seen a film, the best way to illustrate it is the film Blood Diamond with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's a little bit melodramatic, a little bit Hollywood, but the essence of it was quite true. In this particular case, there were 20 of these kids. They all had red eyes. They'd been eating khat. And they all had Kalashnikovs, I presumed loaded. They were in their mid-teens, and I have teenagers, so I know how temperamental they can be, let alone sort of half naked with red eyes and holding a Kalashnikov. And something wild happened. The driver's back began to hunch, and his hair stood on end. He began to sweat. And instinctively, I could see something from his body language. Something's about to go wrong. And I tapped the driver on the shoulder, and he said, is everything all right? And he shook his head, and he said, shh. So we drove up to the boys. We parked the car, and 20 of them, no, there were about 20, 10 of them jumped on the roof. They started pounding on the roof very aggressively, and then the other 10 essentially didn't pull us and instructed us to get out of the car. And we were sweating. We were actually terrified. And this driver, he was literally 2 meters tall. They said, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? He says, just get down, get down, get down. We'd been asked to get out of our cars. The sun is at 12 o'clock. It's terrifying. We're sweating. The driver's shaking. He's on the verge of tears. And then all of a sudden I thought, this can't be as bad as it is. So I remember instinctively I'd taken a copy of the book with me. And I remember looking up at one of the children, and one of the children had these scars on his forehead. And these scars were not of the Mundari. They were of a tribe from Ethiopia called the Mercy. And he'd obviously come across the border. And I remember looking at the pictures in the book and pointing at his forehead. And he looked down. The first thing he did is he put his gun down. And slowly he gathered the other kids. They all put their guns down. They ended up looking in the book with me, looking at the pictures, being fascinated, actually becoming very, very proud. The red in their eyes began to sort of dissipate. The anger began to sort of regress. The heat began to subside. We spent the rest of the night talking. And they traveled with us to the village, to the Mundari. They protected us. They spent the next 2 weeks there explaining to the Mundari, we're the Mercy. We're very proud. Look at these pictures in these books, and look at the pictures he wants to make of you. I don't think I'm necessarily a photographer. I think the whole world has become a photographer. There are 3 billion pictures being uploaded online every day at the moment. But what has happened over the last 31 years, I began to develop a small opinion. It's a very humble opinion. It's a very romantic opinion. It's a very idealistic opinion. And this is what I'd perhaps like to share with you. But in that sort of opinion, which people have come to ask me, and of the thousands of questions, the one thing everybody says, well, Jimmy, you speak English and it's sort of a little bit of basic Dutch. It should be far better after the 20 years that you've been living there. How on earth do you make these pictures? How do you communicate with these people? Next, probably even more importantly, is it's like the circle sort of half complete. I've taken these pictures. I'm sharing stories with you today. But I've also got to sort of go back. I've got to actually show these people what I've been doing. Much the same as the Wadabi, they haven't seen the pictures because it was on film. Here in northern Namibia with the Himba, I had to go and show them. I had to show them what I'd taken off them. You have no idea if you put it on film and you walk away and they stand there questioning. So I eventually went back to the Himba. And I remember the first thing they did when they saw me, they sort of looked at me and they started screaming and yelling, and some of them even remembered my name, Jimmy, Jimmy, Jimmy. And I was like, oh no, I've done something wrong. They came and I said, this is amazing, this is amazing. You know, many people have been here, they said, many people have photographed us in films, but nobody's ever bothered to come back and show us what you took from us. You didn't take our soul, you didn't take our dignity, but you took many, many, many questions which we want to discuss with you, we want to answer, we want to, who are you? What do other people see of us? How do we see ourselves? You actually haven't asked us what we want. We're very confused. 99.9% of the Himba have left their original setting, they've moved off into the cities. We're still here, we want to stay here, but how can we stay here? Is it valuable if we stay here? So that whole discussion is where we're going to now. It's very humbling and very exciting to have sort of gone on this sort of lifelong journey of actually self-discovery, my own discovery. What do I look like? How do you perceive me? How do I perceive you? And then taking it further and further until you get to a whole tribe who are asking in the same question in this modern world. Who are we? Where do we fit? Are we important? And then I leave one last picture. This is of Yuri, again a person, a very specific individual. He lives with the Nenets in the northern Yamal in Siberia. It's excruciatingly cold there in the winter. It's about minus 40 degrees centigrade. Blindingly beautiful. But I leave this picture because I want you to look into his eyes. I want you to look deeply into his eyes, please. Focus on them. And if you look deeply and you see the rather Mr. Bean-esque character standing behind a tripod, flailing, asking for help, and maybe that's what this picture is about, and maybe that's what these people are about. Look into their eyes, look into their culture, look into their dignity, and look into their pride. And what it is, how it is, what significant it is for us in the greater scheme of things. I really don't have that. I don't have the learning or the study, but I do know deeply, instinctively, there's something far more to their beauty than meets the eye. Thank you very much for listening.